They were about to hang her for stealing bread for her 5 children, until an infertile rancher stepped in. Territory: Redstone County, Texas. Frontier date: July 16th. 1883. The sun burned mercilessly over Redstone as dust swirled through the air, settling on faces filled with anger and curiosity. The townspeople gathered beneath the old oak tree, their eyes fixed on a single figure, Clara Mayfield, a 29-year-old widow with trembling hands clutching a torn piece of bread. Her dress was worn, her face pale, but her eyes, filled with fear and sorrow, told a story of a mother's desperation. She had stolen that bread not for greed, but to silence the cries of her 5 starving children. Yet in Redstone, mercy was a stranger. The sheriff tightened the rope, his voice cold as steel. The crowd waited for justice, blind to compassion. Just as the wind carried Clara's final prayer, the silence broke. A man's deep voice cut through the tension. Ethan Cole, a 45-year-old rancher known for his fortune and his loneliness, had stepped forward. The crowd froze as Ethan Cole stepped forward, his boots grinding against the gravel, each step echoing through the tense silence. The sheriff's grip on the rope loosened slightly as Ethan's deep voice carried across the square, calm but firm, asking what crime this woman had truly committed. No one answered. Clara stood motionless, her heart racing, unsure if this stranger's voice meant hope or another form of judgment. Ethan's sharp eyes studied her torn dress, the dirt on her hands, the small piece of bread that had caused all this fury. The storekeeper muttered that she had stolen from him, that law demanded punishment. Ethan nodded slowly, his expression unreadable, then turned toward Clara. "Is it true?" he asked. Her voice cracked as she whispered yes, explaining how her children hadn't eaten in 2 days, how she'd begged for work, how every door had been closed in her face. Her words were soft, but cut through the murmurs like a blade. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, yet no one spoke for her. Ethan's gaze hardened. He looked at the sheriff and said, "You'll hang a mother for trying to keep her children alive?" The sheriff frowned, reminding him that the law didn't bend for pity. Clara's knees gave way, tears streaking down her cheeks as she begged them to spare her, to let her children live without shame. Her cries carried through the dry wind, reaching even those who had come only for spectacle. Ethan turned away briefly, staring at the horizon where his ranch lay miles away, empty and silent, a home without laughter. He had buried his hopes of a family years ago, the doctor's words echoing in his mind that he would never have children. Now, watching Clara tremble, something stirred inside him, a forgotten ache that pushed him to act. He walked closer, his shadow falling across her face, and said, "Let me pay for the bread. Let me take her debt." The sheriff shook his head. "This isn't about debt. It's about law." Ethan didn't back down. "Then the law has no mercy left." His voice grew colder, stronger. "If punishment must be served, let it be under my care. She'll work for me until she's paid every cent." The crowd began to murmur again, torn between curiosity and guilt. Clara stared at him, disbelief and confusion mixing with fear. For a long moment, no one moved. Finally, the sheriff sighed, the rope falling from his hands. "Fine," he muttered, "but her life's on your watch." Ethan stepped closer, cutting the ropes around her wrists. Clara stumbled, but caught herself, unable to speak. He looked at her and said quietly, "Come with me. It's over." The townspeople began to drift away, their excitement fading into shame. As the sun sank lower, Ethan led her toward his horse. Clara turned one last time toward the oak tree, where moments ago she had faced death, and whispered a silent promise to never let her children go hungry again. The evening sun bled across the horizon as Ethan guided his horse slowly through the quiet outskirts of Redstone, the sound of its hooves echoing against the dry earth. Clara sat behind him, silent, clutching the worn shawl around her shoulders, her mind trapped between disbelief and exhaustion. The weight of what had almost happened clung to her like dust. She didn't know this man, didn't know why he had stepped in when no one else had, but something about his silence felt heavier than words. Ethan's jaw was tight, his thoughts distant. He wasn't used to company. For years, the ranch had been his only companion, a place filled with the ghosts of dreams he'd buried long ago. As they neared the edge of town, a few men called out behind them, the sheriff's voice among them. Ethan pulled his reins and turned back, his expression calm but cold. The sheriff rode closer, stopping a few feet away. "You can't just take her, Cole. The town expects to see justice done," he said, his tone rough. Ethan looked him straight in the eye and replied, "Justice isn't a rope around a starving mother's neck." His voice carried no anger, only truth. The sheriff dismounted, stepping closer. "You're a good man, Ethan, but this isn't your business." The people saw what she did. They want an example. Ethan dismounted too, his boots hitting the dirt hard. "Then let them see a different example," he said quietly. "I'll pay 10 times what she owes. I'll feed the storekeeper's pride and the town's thirst for law. But I won't stand by and watch another innocent life taken for a loaf of bread." His words hung heavy in the air, and for a long moment, no one spoke. Clara looked between them, her heart pounding, afraid that one wrong word would send her back to that oak tree. The sheriff sighed, frustration flickering in his eyes. "You can't buy justice, Cole. People talk. They'll say you've gone soft." Ethan's stare didn't waver. "Let them talk. I've lived with silence long enough." The men around them shifted uneasily. No one dared challenge him. Everyone in Redstone knew Ethan Cole's name carried weight. He'd built the largest ranch in the county from nothing, a man known for hard work and honesty. But behind that strength was a loneliness few understood. Years ago, he had dreamed of a family, but fate had denied him that gift. Now, seeing Clara trembling with fear, something inside him cracked open, a need to protect, to give back what life had stolen from both of them. The sheriff finally nodded, defeated. "Do as you please, but remember, if she runs, it's on you." Ethan gave a single nod, mounted his horse, and offered Clara his hand. She hesitated only a moment before taking it. As they rode away, the last light of the sun disappeared behind them, and the whispers of the town faded into the night. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel the emptiness of the open plains. Instead, he felt the fragile weight of a life he had just saved, and the beginning of something he didn't yet understand. The trail to Ethan's ranch stretched long and silent beneath the fading sky, the cool wind brushing against Clara's face as she clung to the saddle. She couldn't tell whether she was being rescued or sentenced to something unknown. The sun dipped behind the red hills, painting the land in shades of gold and rust. When they finally reached the ranch, the house stood tall and lonely against the horizon, surrounded by acres of dry grass and wooden fences that creaked with the wind. Ethan dismounted and offered his hand to her once more, his expression unreadable yet calm. "You'll stay here," he said softly. "Help with the house, the horses, whatever you can manage. You'll earn your keep." Clara nodded weakly, unsure if her voice would even work. Her body was trembling from exhaustion, her feet bruised, her heart heavy. Ethan led her inside. The room smelled of old wood and dust, but they were neat, cared for by someone who valued order over warmth. A single picture rested on the mantel, a young woman smiling beside a much younger Ethan, her eyes full of life. Clara noticed it, but said nothing. He caught her glance and looked away. "My wife," he muttered quietly. "She's gone." His tone held no bitterness, just emptiness. Clara lowered her gaze, feeling the weight of her own loss press harder against her chest. He motioned toward a small room near the kitchen. "You can sleep there. Tomorrow we start early." She thanked him in a voice barely above a whisper, still uncertain if gratitude was enough for what he had done. As the night grew darker, she sat on the small bed, listening to the sounds of the ranch, the distant call of a coyote, the wind tapping against the windows, and somewhere outside, Ethan's boots against the wooden porch. She thought about her children waiting in the old cabin by the river, unaware that their mother was still alive. Tears rolled down her face as guilt and relief tangled inside her. She prayed that Ethan's mercy wasn't temporary, that his heart would remain as steady as it had been before the whole town. Outside, Ethan leaned against the railing, staring at the stars. He couldn't shake the image of Clara's eyes, filled with fear, strength, and something else he hadn't seen in a long time, hope. He knew the town would talk, that men would question his decision to take in a condemned woman. But he didn't care. Something about her reminded him of what it meant to fight for life, to believe in something beyond loss. When he finally turned in, the night had grown colder, but his house didn't feel as empty anymore. In that quiet ranch under the Texas moon, two broken souls who had nothing left began a fragile truce, a bargain of survival that neither of them yet understood would soon change both their lives forever. The first rays of dawn spilled over the Redstone plains, painting the ranch in soft gold as Clara stepped outside, her hands raw from work yet steady with purpose. The weeks that followed her arrival passed in silence at first, filled only with the rhythm of chores and the quiet hum of the wind through the stables. Ethan watched her from a distance, noticing how she mended fences, scrubbed floors, and cared for the horses with a patience born from hardship. She never complained, never asked for more than what she needed. But the house still felt hollow, weighed down by the echoes of what both had lost. One morning, Clara finally gathered the courage to ask Ethan for a favor, to bring her children from the cabin near the river. He hesitated, knowing what that meant, but when he saw the pain flicker in her eyes, he nodded without a word. 2 days later, the wagon returned carrying 5 small faces that would soon change everything. The moment her children ran into her arms, the ranch breathed again. Their laughter filled every corner of the house, turning silence into life. Ethan found himself standing by the porch, watching them chase each other through the dust, their joy like sunlight breaking through clouds. For years he had lived with the sound of emptiness, the creak of wood, the rustle of the wind. But now there were voices, giggles, the sound of small feet running across the floorboards. Clara's smile, though tired, carried warmth that reached him in ways words never could. She cooked, sang softly to her children at night, and little by little, the house that once felt like a tomb began to feel like home again. Ethan tried to stay distant, convincing himself that he was only doing what was right, but every time he saw one of the children hand him water in the field or laugh at his clumsy attempts to fix the wagon, something inside him softened. He started to talk again, to her, to them, small conversations about the sky, the cattle, the way the land changed with the seasons. Clara listened, her eyes gentle, never asking for more than what he could give. She noticed the way he lingered near the doorway when she read to the children, how his expression eased when they called him Mr. Cole with shy respect. One evening, after supper, Ethan found himself smiling without realizing it as the children played with a stray puppy near the fire. The ranch that had once been a place of solitude now echoed with warmth. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something stir deep within, a sense of belonging that he thought had died with his wife. Clara saw it too. She no longer felt like a burden or a servant, but like someone rebuilding a life piece by piece, one sunrise at a time. The quiet man who had saved her from death was beginning to see her not as a stranger, but as the heart that had brought his home back to life the night the bandits came. The sky burned red with firelight and fear, but Clara didn't run. She stood between Ethan and danger, her hands steady, her eyes fierce with the strength of a mother who had already faced death once. The gunfire cracked through the silence, and when it ended, the ranch still stood, scarred but alive. Ethan held her as the dawn broke, his voice trembling with gratitude he could not speak. Word spread across Redstone, and the same people who had once called her a thief now called her the heart of Redstone. The gallows that had waited for her became nothing but a memory, replaced by the sound of children's laughter and the peace she had fought for. Ethan found in her the family he'd longed for, and Clara found in him the home she'd prayed for. Two broken souls had saved each other, and the West remembered their love forever.